obviously China is a market that comes up all the time, so anything that we can, I guess, pass on to our clients and our partners about how to work in the Chinese market effectively.
Great.
Yeah, I'm Helena. I'm an advisor advising on cross-border investment and assessing Chinese market, Australian market, both ways. And I want to learn more about multimedia kind of marketing branding too from Patty. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Edwin. I have some China experience. I live in Shanghai for 8 years, and we have a marketplace now. But from technical side, it's very complete. But we want to know more about how the user will think about when they try to get a marketplace.
When you say marketplace, is it like e-commerce marketplace?
It's e-commerce.
So you have that capability too?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Cool. All right, so I'll just get started. Any questions, like I said, we'll just keep the conversation style. Okay, so I've written a poem for you today, which reads like this: as all tribes stand united by the river, a band emerges, and the elephant can now see clearly for the first time. That's all the presentation for myself. Does this make sense to anyone? I hope not. I just made it up yesterday. So it doesn't make sense to anyone, but it will soon make sense to you as. And now I'll come back and revisit this poem. But I think if you remember this poem from today, you will remember a big chunk of the presentation. Okay. So, as I said before, so this presentation is mostly about the macro, the helicopter view of China, the key differences between marketing in China and to Chinese consumers versus marketing to, say, Australian consumers or non-Chinese consumers. I thought, I'd look at, considering if you're a CMO or someone who is driving the growth of your business through marketing, what's the biggest challenge for you? So this is a survey in 2019 conducted by Deloitte. It has a focus globally, but has a bit of focus in the US market, but I think it applies here as well. So they ask people, as a CMO, what are your top concerns in the coming decade for your job? What are you trying to achieve? So they named 3, and one of them is marketing to China. So 80% of them saying they're trying to increase their investment in China in the next 18 months. And the other 2, just so you know, especially some of you may not be working directly in marketing, are digital-driven insight, and the other one is changing consumer behavior. They're actually quite related. And those 2 are actually really big changes happening in the market, which I'll touch on later. But if you are a marketer, this is the age when you have to be really tapped into changing consumer behavior by understanding their behavior change in media touch points, right? So it's not surprising because as a marketer, one of your key metrics for growth is in developing, expanding your user bases and connecting with them. So China obviously is, I wouldn't say low-hanging fruit because there's a lot of challenges, but the number of consumers there, if you can open that market, obviously is a great opportunity for you to prove to your shareholders or your value, right? So most of the conversation today is about the differences, right? But I also talk about what's similar between China and the rest of the world. The biggest similarity that's kind of hovering over all the countries, including China, and China is also a part of that, is what do you think is the biggest change that's happened in the last, say, 5-10 years? I mean, I've done this great, so I probably don't have to quiz you, but it's the so-called Internet of Things. So when I was working, someone coming from an agency background, Internet of Things was really a buzzword for a long time, and I was wondering, like, what does this really mean for marketers? Really, the Internet of Things signals the change in consumer behavior on a fundamental level. So wearable technology, you have a smartwatch, people have Google Home at their homes, or there's even in your car. So wherever you go, you're governed by this constant flow of connectivity. You're all plugged in. The matrix, right? You're all plugged into that system. So in China and outside of China, that's the biggest similarities. We're all experiencing that big change. The only difference is there is an invisible line between China and, say, Australia. And you probably have all heard of, say, the firewall or different ecosystems in terms of media and operational technology systems. So this would be a typical picture of what a Western consumer could be experiencing, and then on the other side, a Chinese consumer could be using the same phone, but they're having a whole suite of different apps, Face recognition is growing really fast in China, and that's fast becoming one of the key innovation in China marketplace. QR code, if you work in Chinese, does anyone here does not frequently use QR code or haven't really seen it being used? It's very frequent in all the Chinese apps like Alipay or WeChat. You have to use QR code, otherwise you're disabled, right, in that environment. So that's really, but it's never really taken off in the West. We don't have time to go into why today, but it's how it's building the system that connects everything. Okay, so that's what the major difference is between the two ecosystems. But let's step back and think about the fundamental changes behind what I just described. Be it wearable technology, voice recognition, face recognition, smartphones, or artificial intelligence. What is the driving force, the building block, or the common denominator of everything I just mentioned? What is that thing that's making everything possible? It's data. Yeah, exactly. So that's correct. So the data is the smallest unit that's making all this possible. So I would call a picture there of the data. So data is a single building block of that system. It makes everything possible, but at the same time, marketers are increasingly using them to change how they connect with their consumers, right? So you can get information of your consumer on a more holistic level when they're using certain gadgets, how they're using it, and how they're behaving. E-commerce, buying stuff, or transacting online, banking, whatever it is, buying a bottle of wine. So they're using that information to paint a picture of their users. So data really is the fuel in the marketing engine. So I think in Australia, they've done research in 2019. 70% of them said they actually have increased their ROI by using data-driven insights into informed strategy. And this is probably globally. So if you don't know data, you probably are half blind as a marketing professional. So for the first time ever, a lot of Australian CMOs are saying their jobs are almost identical as a CMO because they have to understand the back end, the marketing automation, and how to run consumer insights from the data. So they're getting closer and closer. They have to know those things to actually do their own jobs. Okay? I'll just mention this briefly. So currently we're in an age of collecting data. So if you're a marketer, you're collecting data, you're analyzing it, and you are trying to make sense of what the data means for your consumers. But in the future, with AI, which is artificial intelligence, and that's where China is developing really fast, is you can predict or you can tell when someone is the real inside of it. For example, this is a company, this is just a picture, but there is a company who now claims they can know someone has a mental illness before they actually do it themselves. So how they do that is by collecting information and by looking at the searches they're doing on Google or by reading things they've been saying to their friends or the emails they've been writing. You can tell you probably have depression or you probably have bipolar, but the person themselves don't know. So how they do that is they can actually artificially analyze the information and compare it with, say, 1 million users who also have depression around the globe in 2 seconds. When they're doctors, that they're trained, their psychologists may not know that for another 5 years, right? By talking, having on the chair. So this is really driving the future of marketing. So in the future, you can not only analyze the data, but you can actually know the consumer before they do themselves. So there's a historian who is very popular, who wrote the book Homo Sapiens, and he said that when he was a teenager, he didn't know he was gay, right? But he only realized that when he was in his 20s. So imagine if his computer knew that before he did himself. He said they can target him and market him with all sorts of different marketing material that he had received. And he would like that brand better than other brands. And that's how you can really tap into the power of data. So I've said all of these why. What's the relevance to us today and to China, you might be asking. And here is what data is. Data worship, right? So everyone's using data. Because data is different in China. If we think about data as the smallest building block that changes everything, including how marketing is done in one country or in the world, if data is different, that would mean your whole system. So how do you think data is different? Just by your common knowledge from your work experience or from what you heard on the street or from what you heard from your colleagues, how do you think data is different in China?
I think it's easy for the Chinese to implement
Yeah.
I think privacy in China is not as in Western society.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Chinese are happy to share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else? I think that would be a very key, crucial insight is data privacy. I've had some clients who were keen to go to China, but they wanted their servers were to be hosted in Hong Kong or something because they are not too sure of the data privacy laws in China and how it would impact their business, right? But that's spot on, is exactly I think not the only difference, but the major fundamental difference of data collection between China and say, China. So in the next section is when I'm going to step into that river, bed, and elephants story, because it concerns with China's different ecosystem, and especially concerns how data is used, shared, and how it changes the whole marketing landscape and how you can use it. So the next section is about why is it different, how it's different, and the implication it is for marketers. Can you all hear me? I understand it's okay. So some of you are either of Chinese background or understand Chinese. How many of you know a lot of Chinese history or Chinese culture? Yeah. Okay, quite a few. So was it a third of you? Okay, so for those of you who don't know the rest of the story, this is directed at you. I'm not really a historian, but I think I'm only cherry picking the details that I think have implications on what we're speaking about today. So don't quote me if I said some names wrong or historian facts. Okay, so before that, Game of Thrones, obviously. How many of you have watched Game of Thrones? Anyone? How many of you have heard of Game of Thrones? You know what it is about? Kind of? Okay. So I've never watched it, but I have heard people talking about Game of Thrones, and I think I have a good sense of what it actually is. Very bloody, it's a lot of words, it's chaotic, violent, among other things. And actually when I was doing research for this presentation, I was thinking to myself, for some reason, something came to my mind, which is Three Kingdoms. How many of you have heard of Three Kingdoms? Or Chinese audience probably have. Three Kingdoms? No? So there is a book in China. It's one of China's most classic literature, which is called The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Right? So when I was doing research for this speech, I was thinking, Three Kingdoms actually is like Game of Thrones. It's China's own version of Game of Thrones. It's literally the story of many different warlords in the country competing and fighting to get to the throne. So and they eventually emerged, like three really strong countries or states emerged, and then they were fighting for the throne. But initially there were a lot of different parties involved, right? So I did a search online, which says Romance of the Three Kingdoms might as well be China's Game of Thrones. It's mirror image of that story. I think the only difference is Game of Thrones is fictional, but Three Kingdoms is actually real. So it was based on a real story. So for much of China's history, it was actually going through these phases of very violent, very chaotic, and people fighting with each other, and normal people were living in a very chaotic situation. This is not the only period of time that's happened in China, but this was documented obviously in this really famous book. So why is this important? This is important because during much of those times when the country was divided, so it wasn't one country until the unification, and it really went through a whole long history before it became one country. The people that suffered the most were obviously the everyday, the peasants, the people working on the farms, the everyday people. And the Yellow River is known as China's mother river, right? And everyone that knows Chinese culture knows that's really important in China. So the reason why that's connected is because China is an agricultural society. And for much of the history when China was very divided and in chaos, the farmers along the Yellow River, they were really suffering from flooding, from famine, and from they were dying by the hundreds of thousands along the Yellow River. So eventually, what people did in China was decided, we're going to unite behind this great challenge in front of us, which is we couldn't tame this river. We were really living by tribes and different clans. and we couldn't fix the issue by different clients because you may be living in here and I may be living in there and someone else may be living in there. And we couldn't really solve this problem ourselves. So let's get behind this one cause and try to fix it together. So eventually, throughout Chinese history, in dynasties or under emperors that were able to manage the Yellow River well, everyone was really benefiting from having better food, having better security, having better livelihood. So what's the relevance between that and today? I would like to say that even though today we're not living by the river, we're living actually by a river that's connected by data. Everyone is actually connected by this data, this river of data. Wherever you are, if you are plugged into this river of data, you're plugged into the world market. You're plugged into everybody else. You're plugged into opportunities to connect to the consumer, to the market, to your suppliers, to everyone, right? Even Jack Ma, he famously said, I like to think of the internet, actually he had the same or similar analogy, which is data is like river. Wherever it flows, is able to bring the prosperity to the people around it. So his theory is that he believes, and this is actually Alibaba's ethos, is data is the equalizer. So information is the equalizer. He believes that he's helping small SMEs or people who didn't have the money to connect to a marketplace. The smaller players who couldn't get banks, big banks backing, were able to get finance from Alibaba. So that's actually how Alibaba started. So we went to an Alibaba event a few days ago, and he said something, to that effect, which is the internet is the great equalizer that brings opportunity to everyone. Right? So this is the river part of the river pet elephant story, which is the river actually is flowing through China and other countries as well, and it's bringing opportunity to everyone alongside the riverbank, let's say. And the important thing here is, going back to the issue of privacy, is I think there's a cultural reason why Chinese consumers and the socioeconomic environment in China actually doesn't really emphasize privacy so much. Because this is a cultural collaboration that actually believes the great challenges have to be solved by collaborating. So your individual privacy or your benefits in that process might be sacrificed, but actually ultimately you're trying to solve a very big issue together. So by coming together and sacrificing my individual privacy, I'm able to achieve much bigger things. And I was actually I met someone who is a hairdresser, and he just came here from China some time ago, and I was asking him, what do you think is the biggest difference between Australia and China? And he said, the biggest difference is I can do so much more with my phone. I can do everything on my phone. It's all connected. I said, are you concerned about your privacy, like people stealing your data, or your data is all housed with one supplier? He said, I'm not a criminal. I'm not doing anything bad. So why would I be concerned about people stealing my data? They can do whatever they want with it as long as they can get my food and order my taxi, right? So that culture of collaboration and solving moving this country together by coming together and not really focusing too much on the privacy issue has enabled China to actually create a very different marketing landscape, which is the bad. Not this bad, this bad. So it's very similar to the Three Kingdoms story I told you about before, actually very interestingly. So do many of you know what the bad is? Okay. Yeah, so it's the three biggest conglomerates in China's marketing landscape, e-commerce, right? So B stands for Baidu, A is Alibaba, and T is Tencent. You may not know all of their apps and their systems, but you probably have heard of some of it. Baidu is famous for its search engine, so it's kind of like, so if you go to China and you want to do your marketing, the first thing do you do Baidu search optimization? Do you do Baidu? Because if you're not on Baidu, you're not showing up on the search, right? But they also have, I'll talk about it a little bit more, they have a lot of other services and apps as well. Alibaba is, do I have to say more? Alibaba, I mean, everyone here probably knows about it. They're really strong in e-commerce. So each of them have started from something. For Baidu is search, is information, is content. For Alibaba is e-commerce. And T, Tencent, we all know, or some of us we know, Tencent is famous for WeChat. So if you, I think a couple of years ago, we were doing some consulting for companies going to China, and we wanted to describe this is what people didn't know about WeChat. So we wanted to describe WeChat to them. We said this is the Swiss Army knife of apps because it really can do everything. You can think combines Spotify and Uber and Twitter and Facebook and all Instagram, all these apps together. But that is only one app in their whole ecosystem. Even though Google has I think the data is 2 billion users worldwide, WeChat alone has over 1 billion. And most of them are also concentrated in Chinese-speaking community. So you really could get access to all of those people in this one app. And not to mention all the other apps and systems that's managed under headset. So what's the implication of this? China is a heavy mobile market. This slide, I put this slide in to tell you there may be hundreds and thousands of apps in China because that is the major touch point for Chinese consumers. But they collectively dominate the top 10 or 80% of the top 10 in the app market. They're really, really strong in not only mobile but across the whole media landscape. So this whole market is dominated by these 3 suppliers. And let's take a look at each of them. So I just want to show you a quick sort of overview of what they're doing outside of what they're really strongest in. So for Baidu, they have a really wide range of apps. Content obviously is their key strength, but outside of content, they've developed, and this is based on consumer insight they've got from people who are searching and doing all these related activities in their apps. They've developed networking tools, they have games, they also have their own e-commerce, they have services for travel, for reading, for booking doctor's appointments, for navigation, they have videos, they have other tools like Wi-Fi services, calendars, Baidu, they have news services as well. So they've really expanded on the basis of that core audience collected initially and expanded into a lot of other different areas. So Alibaba is very strong in e-commerce, and also by the same process, they've expanded from e-commerce to other long-tail platforms and products, services, music videos, games, tools, social networking, and news. And when I say long tail, is a lot of their apps and different systems can actually have the consumer going from the beginning to they're staying within their system for a very long time. Like e-commerce, you probably use them to buy suppliers, and then use them to buy something, and then use them to promote it. Like they can stay in the ecosystem for a very long time. And Tencent is very strong in WeChat. We know they're really good at social networking, but they also have other gaming. They're very strong. So they're even targeting a slightly younger audience maybe because their initial, at least, the consumer base is very young. So they've built a lot of services and spin-off other services for these group of people. But they have music, videos, also services, social media, information news, and tools. So each of these suppliers collectively occupies 80% of the market. It's very deeply connected with the consumers every aspect of their life. So if you think about, and this is a very commonly used chart in media planning, which is what's your media touch point with the user throughout the day, from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. You can see that even most of their days, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you are connected to some sort of apps that belongs to one of these big ecosystems. Why is that important? Because you can actually collect information about contextual behavior data of consumers almost with very little restrictions. So let's think of Facebook. If you work with Facebook as a Western marketer, it's very hard for you to then know which taxi they took and where they went to, and then which airline they fly with, and how much they bought on which platform, and what they did, socializing, where they got a date. You don't know those information because you're not in those systems. But this is different for Chinese marketers. When you are in that market, you're essentially collecting information on all those aspects on the consumer's life. So all the contextual data and all the behavior data. So what they do, when they do it, and how they do it. You know all of that information. So you could know someone is a student who likes which singer, and she went to the concert in which city, buy which ticket using how much money, and then which dinner she had, and then after that, who she met with, after dinner, and then when she got home, which TV program she watched, and then how many tweets, or not tweets, but how many messages she shared with her friends, and then, you know, when she ordered takeaway, and like, you know all of this information, which is isolated in silos for a lot of Western marketers. So now we come to the elephant part of the story. Yes?
Can I just ask how that information, that data is mined by a company that's marketing its own online platforms? So how did the platforms itself make that data available?
So the platforms themselves do have their own systems, their own algorithms to monitor, use, collect this information, and then they can partner with someone. Say, if you're a brand that wants to with China, instead of you doing channel planning, spending a lot of time on channel planning, say, you know, how much money should I'm using a Western example, how much money should I spend on Facebook, how much on Twitter, and which one should be a video, which one should be a post. You can just go to Baidu or Alibaba, or wherever it is, saying, I want to give you $1 million. I want to do this with the consumers, and then they're able to tell you, and then you can actually spend how much on e-commerce and how much on there, because I have all of them.
So they're not giving you the data, they're giving you the insights.
I think it depends on how you collaborate with them. But like Alibaba actually has a platform called Alimama, which is online, and you can actually have a play with it. But this platform is specifically on all the user behavior data. They've just launched it I think it was last year or 2 years ago. This is more on dynamic creatives. So they can tell across all the Alibaba platforms which creative you're using for your category that's going to get the most response, and what format, and I mean, some automation and some platforms in the West are also doing that, but then you're directly plugged into the sales platform, right? You're not only doing media marketing, China Online, MSN, like you're actually connecting to people who are also buying from you, because Alibaba has all of those assets themselves. So they're giving you everything, not only one slice of it. Does that answer your question? So this is the elephant story. For those of you who are familiar with the Chinese history, you would know this story really well. So the story is called The Blinds Touch the Elephant, right? So what the story means is, if you're a blind person and you are randomly assigned a place, you know, and to touch the elephant, you're asked, what does the elephant look like? You may give them a very different answer depending on where you're standing, right? But what I just told you of Chinese media ecosystems and the marketplace means you can take off the blind. Because for a Chinese marketer, you're not this blind person touching the trunk or tail of the elephant. You actually can see 80% of what your consumer is. Imagine how that can change the way you do marketing, because everything is based on the data analysis and how clear you can see your consumer as a whole person. So by taking off that blind, this is why I said in the beginning, so when people unite behind this river, you know, they are giving their data or whatever format it is, you know, they're plugged in the system willingly. The BAT system is able to occupy the Chinese market, and you know, people don't really complain too much about monopoly or antitrust. You know, they are able to survive in that circumstance. And then they can see, for the first time, they can see the consumer very clearly. So each of the system is able to provide you with information that you wouldn't be able to get from Facebook or Twitter, because they're so segmented. So when you go to China into marketing, you're able to tap into that resource by collaborating with these big suppliers. But of course, there will always be changes in the future, and there might be smaller players doing other different things. Like one of the apps is TikTok, or TikTok is a very fast-growing app globally. Even they don't belong to any of these conglomerates, but sometimes what happens is they're bought by these conglomerates, or they do something bigger. But we've seen it happen with a lot of the fast-growing apps. They're bought by one of these three. Okay. So how does it reshape the reshape marketing and the CMO's job? So this is a survey done by Dentsu Aegis. So this is 2019, and people were asked. This is across APAC, so Chinese marketers as well as Australian marketers. They were asked. So there's a large performance gap across marketing capabilities. As I said, marketing CMO's job has changed. So what are your top challenges, and where do you think you don't have the capacity to or capability to fulfill that role? And just look at the top two are the ones that have the biggest gaps. And the first one is creativity and big ideas that build the brand and create an emotional connection. The second is data collection, management, and analytics that drive real consumer insight. So given what I've said before just now, who do you think has the better solution to the second challenge, the Chinese marketer or the Western? Probably the Chinese marketers who have a much better picture of their consumers. And obviously sometimes they don't have a director, right? They have to partner with someone, they have to access to someone else. But this is interesting because if you really think about it, once you have little restriction on the